OverBlood is a survival horror game developed by River Hillsoft and published by Electronic Arts. OverBlood tells the story of Raz Carsey, a man who woke up from cryogenic sleep with no memories of his past. He must find a way to escape the laboratory while also uncovering secrets of who he is and what's been going on in this laboratory. Starting with the positives, this game has a creepy atmosphere. While I wouldn't say this game is scary, the creep factor is still there, especially with its sounds and visuals. The soundtrack for this game alone gives it a really nice ambient tone throughout the entire game, and it does a good job when the soundtrack starts to build up when something big is about to happen. And for 1997, I'll say that the visuals are pretty decent, for PS1 standard of course. The characters look nice for the time, and the backgrounds themselves, while a little bland, I'll give credit to say that they're done decently well. And there are some areas in the game when it does feel a little creepy and really adds to the tone of the game. Gameplay-wise is where this game starts to dip. The controls in this game are your typical tank controls from the old survival horror days, and while I didn't have an issue with them, they'll probably take getting used to. However, I will say when I'm trying to run, it makes Raz try to push something when I'm trying not to. That gets annoying. The camera in this game is pretty interesting. You have your standard fixed camera angles, but you can switch between behind the shoulder or first person, and all three perspectives can be beneficial in certain situations. The combat is one of this game's biggest weak points. When you fight an enemy, all that happens is they run around you and you have to hit them at the right time. It's not difficult depending on your skill level with the controls, but it can be tedious. The story in this game isn't too bad. It's got some cool ideas, and there are times when I'm interested to see what went down in this lab. But the voice acting and the dialogue in this game are pretty weak. Not to mention the characters themselves aren't that interesting. Raz is your dollar store Barry Burton, but lacks the charm and badassery that Barry has. But at least they make up for it for the bad voice acting. Later in the game you meet a girl named Millie, and while she is pretty bland, she is very important to the story, so I won't go too deep into her, but she's a character that you meet. And then the other character that you will meet in this game is Peepo. And ironically enough, Peepo, the robot, is probably the most interesting character in this game. And all he says is beeps and boops. However, there is something that's kind of cool with these characters, in that you can actually switch between the characters. And you're going to have to sometimes to solve puzzles. Really gave me some Resident Evil 0 vibes before Resident Evil 0 came out. So that's kind of cool. Surprisingly, this game has platforming. What isn't surprising is that the platforming is terrible. Jumping is super stiff and so goddamn clunky. There are times when I was just so afraid that I would jump into a pit and die, and then I would have to go back into the main menu and pray to God that I saved before I had to platform. By the way, this game has a built-in save state in the form of a tape recorder. It's kinda neat, but if you plan on playing this game, make sure you save before anything big happens. Lengthwise, this game is about 4 hours long, so you should be able to beat this game pretty quickly. And difficulty-wise, this game is pretty easy, assuming you get the controls down. The hardest part of this game is finding items you need to progress. An annoying thing this game does is it won't show you where the items are. Unless you have a guide, you're basically going to be left to dry humping everywhere in hopes to find a key or ammo or anything that's important for you to progress. The final boss is a little tricky, however, but that's only due to its piss-poor inventory selection. It's slow, and you have to keep just about everything you find in the game, and it's a pain in the ass, especially because it doesn't pause when you go through your items. You see, in Resident Evil, you are allowed to go through your items and it pauses the game so that no enemies can get you. However, in OverBlood, they say, fuck all that noise, you better get your gun out before the guy starts to kill you. And it's a pain in the ass because the inventory selection is so fucking slow. So, my word of advice from me, before you head into the final boss, make sure you have your gun ready to go so that you can get through it. There isn't much left to talk about for this game without spoiling major plot points, so I'll just talk about River Hill Soft, a studio in Japan from the 80s, primarily making games for the PC Engine, and other popular gaming consoles at the time. OverBlood released in 1996, just 4 months after the original Resident Evil, and while OverBlood didn't set the world on fire like the first RE did, OverBlood was able to get a sequel called OverBlood 2, and it looked way cooler than OverBlood 1. But sadly, OverBlood 2 didn't make it to the States, only being available in Japan and in Europe. In the year 2000, they would focus more on mobile gaming. However, it wasn't successful, and the company filed for bankruptcy in 2004. Thankfully, the employees there decided to make their own company called Alti Incorporated. Another really cool, interesting fact about this game's lead programmer was Akihiro Hino, who would go on to work on some great games like Dark Cloud, Dragon Quest VIII, Dragon Quest IX, and a bunch of other cool JRPGs. Rogue Galaxy is another game he worked on that's really cool. Overall, OverBlood was a pretty interesting game, to say the least, and I would be lying to you if I said I didn't have a good time. To be honest with you, I did have a good time. The voice acting is so bad, and there are some points in this game where I was interested in the story. Big shout out to the Gaming Brit Show, as his video on OverBlood is what made me want to go out and actually play this game and also do my video on it, because it just looked that interesting. I'm a fan of PS1 survival horror, and this was right up my alley. So I have no regrets playing this game, even though it really isn't all that great. I still had a good time with it though, and would I recommend for you to play it? Maybe. Anyways guys, that's going to be it for me. Let me know down below what you thought of OverBlood. Did you actually play it? Let me know down below, and I'll see you next time. Big thanks to Miasma Senpai, Warpbait, and Ash the Man for supporting me on Patreon. You guys are awesome.